Welcome back. Today we're going to be discussing branches of the spinal nerves. Make sure you've already watched the two movies that preceded this, Spinal Cord Reflexes and Anatomy of the Spinal Cord. Before we get really deep into the spinal nerves, and we have to do a little bit of anatomy. So spinal nerves are set up very similarly to muscles and muscle fibers. You can have a neuron, and around the axon of each neuron is an endoneurium, which is just a connective tissue covering around an individual neuron. We bundle a whole pile of axons together, and that becomes a fascicle. And of course, the fascicle has to have a connective tissue covering around it, and that becomes the perineurium. And then if you have a whole pile of fascicles bundled together, that's called a nerve. So remember, a nerve is a bundle of axons in the PNS. Around the entire nerve, we have connective tissue covering called the epineurium. Okay, so we've covered what happens in here with the reflexes and with ascending and descending tracts, but what happens out here? Let's draw a new picture. Ooh, do I have any paper? Okay, so let's imagine that I have more room than I do. And here's our spinal nerve coming out. And we know that this is what's called a mixed nerve because it's carrying both sensory and motor. So we've got our, I don't have enough hands here, sorry. So we've got our sensory information that's still coming in, and we've got our motor information that's coming out. And don't forget, we also have our autonomic nervous system motor information that's coming out. So we've got all kinds of things going on. This spinal nerve actually splits, and it splits into 4 branches. And these branches are called rami. All right, each one is called a ramus. So we have to draw this as splitting into 4. And remember, we had up here is the dorsal side, so the back, and down here is the ventral side, so the front. And we're going to have this split into a dorsal ramus, and we're going to have a ventral ramus, and we're going to have another ramus, I don't know how to draw this, that sort of swings back around and goes back towards the cord. And then we're going to have a special ramus that is involved with autonomic nervous system stuff. So if you can imagine this, we have a ramus that's called the posterior ramus. And it's going to be a mixed nerve as well, and it's going to bring in information and take out motor information from the muscles and skin of the back. Okay, we also have the anterior ramus. Don't you love the way that we switch between ventral and anterior all the time? I love. And the anterior ramus is going to bring in information and take out information about the muscles, the limbs, both the upper and lower limbs, your arms and your legs, and then the skin of the front and the trunk. This one that kind of swings around and goes back towards the cord is called the meningeal branch. And that's going to be bringing information, sensory and motor information, back to the cord and the vertebrae, ligaments, and blood vessels. And then this other one over here has got a very fancy name. It's called the rami communicantes, and that has to do with the autonomic nervous system. So We have to make sure all of our things go to the right places. So our sensory information from the back is going to come in here. Our sensory information from the front and the limbs is going to come in here. We're going to merge together and run in the spinal nerve. And our sensory information from the cord and the vertebrae are going to come in and merge as well. So all of these are coming in on different branches, merging together in the spinal nerve, and then are going to go on this dorsal root. Our skeletal motor information is going to go out to the front of the body, and the arms and the legs is going to go on this anterior ramus. To go to the back of the body, it's going to have to go this way on the posterior ramus to the muscles in the skin of the back. Any skeletal motor information that has to go to the cord is going to go this way. And that's pretty much it. This orange one, remember this was your autonomic nervous system. This is going to go out on the Rami communicantes, and it's going to innervate the autonomic nervous system, which again consists of glands, smooth muscle, and cardiac muscle. So those are our 4 branches. 1, posterior ramus. 2, anterior ramus. This is really the big ones because this is the limbs, the trunk, the front of the body. So that's the biggest branch. 3, the meningeal branch, pretty small one, going back to innervate the parts of the cord and the vertebral column. And 4, the communicantes, which has to do with the autonomic nervous system. So I have a picture of this. Where did my picture go? This is the textbook's much better looking drawing. And you can see that the spinal cord is in the middle, right here. You can see the gray matter inside. You can actually see, maybe if you look closely, I'll do it in orange, you can see the dura mater, which is that outer covering there. You've got your subarachnoid space, which is all this black stuff in here that's filled with cerebrospinal fluid. You've got your epidural space, which is outside the dura, that's filled with fat. And you've got your dorsal root and your ventral root right there. Those two merge together. There's the dorsal root ganglia, and here's your spinal nerve. Now, these are going to split off. Here's the spinal nerve over here. You can see this is the anterior ramus, this one right here. It's the biggest, thickest one. The anterior ramus, again, is going to innervate the skin, the muscles of the trunk, and upper and lower limbs on the front. So that's why it's so big. And remember, it's a mixed nerve. So sensory information is coming in and motor information is going out on this. We have the posterior ramus right here, and you can see how it's leading into those deep muscles of the back. Here, remember the spinous process, that's facing towards the posterior side of the body. And we're going to innervate the deep muscles in the skin on the back. So here's your posterior ramus. Your meningeal branch is shown right here. You can't see it very well, but it's basically going back into the epidural space and back into where the cord is. And the Rami communicantes, so the Rami communicantes is basically going to here, and we will get to the autonomic nervous system soon, but it kind of looks like this. It has a lot of complexes where it meets up, and this is running the autonomic nervous system. Okay, so we've got our 4 branches: anterior, posterior, meningeal, and autonomic nervous system, and those are the Rami.
That's it for today. See you in class.